Hello, and welcome to this fifth video in the series that we've entitled Our Journey. In this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath was something that was a little easier for us to start to do, but it wasn't necessarily the most natural. I tend to be a bit of a relaxed person, and if there's an opportunity to relax, I'll take it. But as we began to celebrate the Sabbath, I actually struggled with it. And that's because I had a to-do list. It was Saturday and I wanted to be able to accomplish certain things. But as we continued to celebrate the Sabbath, it actually became a very special time. And my wife will definitely point out to you, and it's something that I like to do as well. But we get an opportunity to bless our children, and we have an opportunity to bless each other. So it's a special moment for us as a family. We also get together with other families and we praise the Lord, we spend time in His Word, we study it, we try to learn and to grow. And so the Sabbath, as we've continued to do it, has actually become something that we look forward to, that we want to do. And it's become a special time for us. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that we just jumped into it with both feet and didn't do any studying at all. So I want to share with you something that actually I used to use when others would talk to me about following the Sabbath. So let's start with Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 through 2. It says, "At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and His disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to Him, 'Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.'" Now, when I used to read verses like this, I would immediately think, well, that's the Sabbath. It's just not that important anymore. And even as I read now, it's the Pharisees, right? Those Pharisees that always wanted to put burdens on people. And surely Jesus is going to say, no, it's not that important. But here are some things that I found as I continue to study. So let's continue on verse 3 in the same chapter. It says, "But He said to them, 'Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? Now he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priest. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless?'" Wait a minute. So Jesus didn't say that it was lawful what they were doing. He actually gives an example of when David did something that was not lawful. And then he goes on to say that the priests actually profane, which means to desecrate the Sabbath. Well, this is before Jesus died and rose again. So surely He wouldn't be teaching the disciples to break one of the 10 commandments, the fourth commandment. So there's got to be something going on here. That's more than just saying, oh, the Sabbath. It's just not that important. Here's something else that comes out. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 12, verse 10, just a few verses down. It says, "And behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. And they asked him, saying, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?' That they might accuse him." And if we go on over to Matthew 26, verse 59 through 60, it says, "Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put Him to death, but found none." Now, if Jesus said that it was not lawful and gave an example of something that was not lawful, then surely the Pharisees could have used that to say, hey, He's teaching to break the fourth commandment, the Sabbath. Something that would have flown against everything that they were doing at the time, that the Jewish people would have been doing and celebrating. And it actually goes against even what Jesus said, that if you love me, you'll obey my commandments. So something's not matching here. Well, Jesus gives us the answer. If we go back to chapter 12, verse 7, he actually says, "But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless." And if we go on to Matthew 23, verse 23, here's another example of what he's talking about. It says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, which are justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone." So what are these weightier matters? What is Jesus pointing to? Well, let me share an example that was given to me that I think makes a lot of sense. So, in any country where there are roads and there's cars to drive on, there's going to be rules to the road. And in some countries you drive on the right, in some countries you drive on the left. But there's a rule. There's also rules about traffic lights or stop signs, or even how fast you can drive. There's speed limits. Now, we're not allowed to just simply break those rules because we want to. But what happens when an ambulance has somebody that they have to get over to the emergency room? Well, they run through the red light and nobody says a thing. Nobody questions it. Why? Because that person needs attention. It could be a life-threatening situation. And so that life is a weightier matter. It's something that is much more important than just simply following the rules of the road. And so actually, Jesus uses a very similar example even within the verses that we've talked about. So let's continue. Let's go back to chapter 10 and let's continue a few verses down. So in Matthew chapter 12, verse 10 through 13, it says, "And behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him. Then he said to them, What man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value, then, is a man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other." So Jesus gives a very similar example. He says, look, if one of your sheep falls into the pit, you go and basically rescue it. But yet you don't want to allow healing of a man who is above an animal. That is a weightier matter, the life of a person. Jesus wanted to heal on the Sabbath. And it says this is lawful because it's a weightier matter. Now, I will share, because as I learned this, it was one of those things that I had to work through. And that is, hey, I'm under mercy. Jesus said, it's about justice and mercy and faith. So, maybe I can do that thing or this other thing that I wanted to do. But Jesus was very pointed and very specific as to what was a weightier matter. So let me give you an example. What if I wanted to work overtime on the Sabbath just to be able to have money to go buy the latest phone? Well, I would venture to guess that Jesus wouldn't consider that a weightier matter. So that's just one example, something that I had to work through as I continued to study what the Sabbath was about and what Jesus said about the Sabbath. So I just share some of the things that we have found as we have continued to study. And our hope has been that we have shared this journey in a way that it's an encouragement to you and to those around you. And so I hope to see you soon. And as always, I thank you for taking the time to watch these videos. Thanks.